The cold, metallic clang of the cell door echoed ominously, reverberating through the cavernous chamber. Dazed and disoriented, Ethan Taylor stumbled to his feet, his hands grazing the smooth, unyielding surface of the walls. Overhead, the faint hum of alien machinery hummed, a chilling reminder that he was light years away from Earth, a captive of beings whose motives he could only guess at. Ethan had been plucked from his homeworld in a blinding flash of light, his memory a fragmented mosaic of screams, confusion, and the sickly sweet scent of something otherworldly. Now he found himself confined in what appeared to be an alien menagerie, the cell's walls lined with runic patterns that shimmered faintly, suggesting an advanced form of energy containment. The air was thick, carrying an acrid tang that stung his nostrils and throat. Every breath felt like inhaling fire, but Ethan pushed through the discomfort, his survival instincts kicking into overdrive. He barely had time to process his predicament when the shadows in the far corner of the cell stirred. A low growl rumbled through the air, resonating deep within his chest. Ethan turned slowly, his breath catching as a pair of glowing, amber eyes emerged from the gloom. Then another pair, and another. Dragons. 3 of them. Each one was a monstrous blend of sinewy muscle and iridescent scales, their elongated bodies coiled with latent power. Their wings, folded against their sides, glistened like molten metal, and their serrated teeth glinted in the dim light. They regarded him with predatory curiosity, their nostrils flaring as they caught his scent. Saliva dripped from their fanged maws, sizzling as it hit the metallic floor. These weren't the mythical creatures of Earth's legends. They were something far more alien, their forms a twisted amalgamation of reptilian and otherworldly traits. For a moment, silence reigned, broken only by the soft crackle of their claws against the floor. Then the largest of the trio, a creature with crimson scales and horns like obsidian blades, stepped forward, exhaling a plume of smoke. It bared its teeth, a soundless snarl that promised swift and brutal death. Ethan should have been terrified. Any ordinary human would have cowered, paralyzed by fear. But Ethan was no ordinary man. Years spent in the most dangerous corners of Earth, where humanity's monstrous side thrived unchecked, had honed him into something else entirely. He had fought, killed, and survived in ways that had left him a scarred and battle-hardened shadow of the man he once was. And now, faced with creatures bred for terror, something primal stirred within him. A grin split his face, sharp and feral. "Oh, you've got no idea what you've just locked yourselves in with." The dragons hesitated, sensing the shift in his demeanor. The crimson one snarled and lunged, its massive jaws snapping shut inches from Ethan's face. He moved like lightning, sidestepping the attack and driving his elbow into the creature's throat. It let out a strangled roar, rearing back in surprise, its claws raking the air where Ethan had stood moments before. "You're big," Ethan said, his voice low and taunting. "But big doesn't mean invincible." The other 2 dragons joined the fray, their movements coordinated and lethal. One's tail lashed out like a whip, while the other leapt into the air, its claws extended. Ethan dropped into a roll, narrowly avoiding the tail as it smashed into the wall behind him. The impact sent a reverberation through the cell, cracked spiderwebbing along the surface of the alien material. He came up on one knee, his hands finding a jagged piece of debris on the floor, a shard of alien metal, sharp enough to serve as a makeshift weapon. The aerial dragon dove at him, its jaws wide open. Ethan waited until the last second before driving the shard upward, burying it deep in the creature's neck. The dragon let out a piercing shriek, its body convulsing as it crashed to the ground in a heap. A pool of luminescent blood spread around its lifeless form, casting an eerie glow across the cell. The other 2 roared in fury, their amber eyes blazing with rage. The crimson dragon's chest began to glow, a telltale sign of the fire it was preparing to unleash. Ethan darted behind the downed dragon, using its massive corpse as a shield just as the flames erupted. The intense heat scorched the air, but the body absorbed the brunt of the attack, its scales charring and blackening under the onslaught. Ethan didn't stop. He couldn't afford to. Adrenaline coursed through his veins as he leapt onto the dead dragon's back, using it as a platform to launch himself at the Crimson Leader. He landed squarely on its head, driving his makeshift weapon into its eye. The dragon thrashed violently, trying to dislodge him, but Ethan held on, twisting the shard deeper until the creature's movements slowed and finally ceased. The remaining dragon, smaller and quicker than the others, circled him warily. It hissed, its forked tongue flicking out as if tasting the air for weakness. Ethan stared it down, his chest heaving as he caught his breath. Blood dripped from his hands, a mixture of his own and the dragon's. His muscles ached, and a gash on his arm oozed crimson, but his resolve was unshaken. "Still think I'm prey?" he growled. The dragon's eyes flicked to its fallen kin, then back to Ethan. Slowly, it lowered its head, a guttural rumble emanating from its throat. It wasn't a growl of aggression, but something closer to submission. The faint hum of machinery in the background seemed to intensify, as though the unseen captors were monitoring the unfolding events with great interest. Ethan straightened, his grip on the shard relaxing slightly. "Smart choice," he muttered. The tension in the room began to dissipate, replaced by an uneasy calm. He knew better than to lower his guard completely. This was no ordinary cell, and his captors were far from human. Whatever their intentions, this was only the beginning. Ethan barely had time to catch his breath before the cell's walls began to shimmer. A high-pitched tone filled the air, growing louder and more grating with every second. The runic patterns that lined the walls pulsed erratically, their once steady glow now flashing in chaotic bursts. Then, with a sudden burst of light, a section of the wall dissolved, revealing a group of alien figures standing on the other side. They were tall and angular, their translucent skin pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that shifted in rhythm with the tone. Their eyes, dark and inscrutable, regarded Ethan with a mixture of fascination and calculation. Their appearance was both mesmerizing and unsettling, their features so alien that Ethan struggled to process them. They wore no visible clothing, their bodies instead adorned with intricate lines of light that seemed to serve both decorative and functional purposes. One of them stepped forward, its elongated fingers manipulating a device that projected a series of holographic symbols into the air. The symbols rearranged themselves, forming words in a language Ethan could understand. "You are unexpected." Ethan straightened, wiping the dragon blood from his face with the back of his hand. His gaze was sharp, unyielding. "Yeah, I get that a lot. Care to tell me why I'm here?" The alien tilted its head, the bioluminescence on its skin shifting to a cooler hue. "You were chosen as a test subject, to measure the resilience of your species. The dragons were deemed sufficient challenge." Ethan snorted, his lips curling into a wry smile. "Well, they weren't. So what now? You throw me into another cell with something bigger." The alien's patterns shifted again, this time displaying a ripple of what might have been amusement. "You misunderstand. You have exceeded our expectations. The experiment has yielded results beyond prediction. Your performance will be analyzed further." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Analyze all you want. Doesn't explain why you abducted me in the first place." The alien's gaze didn't waver. "Your kind has drawn our attention. Primitive yet tenacious. Fragile yet adaptive. We seek to understand your potential, to determine your place in the greater order." "And what if I don't want to be part of your greater order?" Ethan shot back. He tightened his grip on the shard of alien metal in his hand, his body tense and ready for a fight. The alien raised a hand, a gesture that seemed to signal calm. "Your cooperation is not required. Your actions speak for you. You have demonstrated strength, resourcefulness, and an indomitable will. These traits are significant." Before Ethan could respond, the holographic symbols dissolved, and the alien turned to its companions. Their bioluminescent patterns shifted in rapid, complex sequences as they communicated silently. Ethan's frustration simmered as he watched them, his mind racing with potential ways to escape. He was outnumbered and outgunned, but he'd been in worse situations before. He just needed an opening. The alien's silent conversation ended abruptly. The lead figure turned back to him, its bioluminescence now a steady, neutral glow. You will be transported back to your world. However, our observation will continue. Your actions will shape our understanding. Ethan's jaw tightened. Observation? What's that supposed to mean? The alien didn't answer. Instead, the shimmering light enveloped Ethan once more. The cell, the dragons, the aliens, all dissolved into nothingness. For a brief moment he felt weightless, his body suspended in a void of blinding light. Then, with a sudden jolt, he was back on solid ground. The first thing Ethan noticed was the air. It was crisp and cool, carrying the earthy scent of a forest after rain. The second thing was the sky, an expanse of deep blue dotted with fluffy white clouds. He was back on Earth, or at least somewhere that looked like Earth. Ethan surveyed his surroundings, his senses on high alert. Towering trees surrounded him, their dense canopies casting dappled shadows on the forest floor. The chirping of birds and the rustling of leaves created a stark contrast to the sterile silence of the alien cell. For a moment, he allowed himself to relax, the familiarity of the environment easing some of the tension in his body. But the peace didn't last. In the distance, a low, resonant growl echoed through the forest. It was a sound Ethan recognized all too well, a predator's warning. He turned toward the source, his muscles coiling like a spring. The shard of alien metal was still in his hand, its edge glinting in the sunlight. The growl came again, closer this time. The underbrush rustled, and Ethan caught a glimpse of movement, a flash of scales, a glint of teeth. His heart pounded as he realized what he was facing. Dragons, or something very much like them. These creatures were smaller than the ones in the alien cell, their forms sleeker and more agile. Their scales shimmered with a metallic sheen, reflecting the light in a mesmerizing display of color. Their eyes, however, were the same, amber and unblinking, filled with predatory intent. Ethan's mind raced. Had the aliens released these creatures here, or were they native to this place? Either way, it didn't matter. Survival was the only thing that mattered. The first dragon lunged, its movements a blur of speed and precision. Ethan sidestepped, driving the shard into its flank as it passed. The creature let out a screech, its body twisting as it crashed into the underbrush. The second dragon was already upon him, its claws slashing through the air. Ethan dropped to the ground, narrowly avoiding the attack. He rolled to his feet and lashed out with the shard, catching the dragon across the snout. It recoiled, hissing in pain. The third dragon circled him, its movements cautious and deliberate. Ethan could see the intelligence in its eyes, the way it studied him, searching for a weakness. He didn't give it the chance. With a burst of speed, he closed the distance, driving the shard into its chest. The creature let out a final, shuddering cry before collapsing to the ground. The forest fell silent once more, the only sound Ethan's ragged breathing. He stood over the fallen dragons, his body aching but his resolve unshaken. If the aliens were watching, they'd just received another lesson in what it meant to be human. He wasn't prey. He was a predator. Ethan's breathing slowed as he surveyed the aftermath of the battle. The three dragons lay lifeless on the forest floor, their blood seeping into the earth and casting an iridescent sheen over the underbrush. He wiped the alien shard clean on his tattered shirt and tucked it into his belt, his mind already working through his next move. Wherever he was, this forest was no ordinary place, and if the aliens had been truthful about their intentions, he was far from done with their tests. The canopy above rustled, and for a moment, Ethan thought it might be the wind, but the sound was too deliberate, too rhythmic. He tensed, scanning the treetops for movement. A shadow flickered between the branches, fast and nimble. His grip tightened on the shard as he prepared for another fight. Enough! The voice was deep and resonant, but it wasn't spoken aloud. It echoed directly in his mind, carrying a weight of authority that made Ethan's skin crawl. He whirled around, searching for the source, but the forest appeared empty. "Who's there?" Ethan demanded, his voice sharp. "Show yourself." The shadows coalesced, forming a shape that stepped out from the trees. It wasn't another dragon, nor was it one of the aliens who had captured him. The figure was humanoid but impossibly tall, its skin a shimmering black that absorbed the light. Its eyes were orbs of molten gold, and its presence radiated an aura of both menace and majesty. "You have proven yourself capable," the figure said, its voice now audible but still carrying that same unsettling resonance. "But capability alone does not earn you freedom." Ethan squared his shoulders, refusing to be cowed. "And who are you to decide that?" The figure tilted its head, as though considering the question. "I am a sentinel, a guardian of this realm. And you, human, are an anomaly." "An anomaly?" Ethan repeated, his tone laced with defiance. "I didn't ask to be here. Your alien friends made that decision for me." The sentinel's golden eyes narrowed. "They are not my friends. Their experiments have disrupted the balance of this place. You are their instrument, but you are also their mistake." Ethan's lips curled into a bitter smile. "So what? You're here to clean up their mess? Kill me and call it a day." The sentinel's expression didn't change, but there was a shift in its posture, a subtle tension that made Ethan's instincts scream danger. "Your survival is not my concern. Your actions, however, will determine the fate of this realm, and perhaps your own." Before Ethan could respond, the sentinel raised a hand. The air around him shimmered, and the ground beneath his feet began to dissolve. He felt himself falling, tumbling through a void of shifting light and shadow. When the sensation stopped, he found himself in a new environment entirely. Gone was the forest with its towering trees and dappled light. Ethan now stood on a barren plain, the ground cracked and dry beneath his boots. Jagged peaks loomed in the distance, their dark silhouettes cutting against a blood-red sky. The air was heavy with heat and the acrid smell of sulfur. Whatever this place was, it reeked of danger. A low rumble drew his attention. The ground trembled, and fissures snaked outward from a central point. From the largest crack emerged a creature unlike any he had faced before. It was massive, its body a grotesque amalgamation of flesh and stone. Molten veins of lava pulsed beneath its cracked hide, and its eyes burned with an intense, unrelenting fury. Its claws raked the earth as it roared, a sound that seemed to make the very air vibrate. "Of course," Ethan muttered to himself, because dragons weren't enough. The creature charged, its massive form moving with surprising speed. Ethan sprinted to the side, barely avoiding the swipe of a claw that left a deep gouge in the ground. He rolled to his feet and drew the shard from his belt, but he knew it wouldn't be enough. This thing was built like a tank, and a single piece of alien metal wasn't going to cut it literally. He needed a plan. Fast. The creature roared again, its molten eyes locked onto him. Ethan noticed something in its movements, a slight hesitation, a stiffness in its left leg. It wasn't much, but it was a weakness. And Ethan had learned long ago that exploiting weaknesses was often the difference between life and death. As the creature lunged, Ethan sprinted toward a nearby outcrop of jagged rocks. He scrambled up the uneven surface, the shard clutched tightly in his hand. The creature followed, its massive claws digging into the rock as it climbed. Ethan waited until it was almost upon him before leaping to another ledge, his movements quick and precise. The creature snarled in frustration, its injured legs struggling to keep up with its relentless pursuit. Ethan's mind raced. He needed to bring it down, but how? The shard might be able to pierce its molten veins if he could get close enough, but doing so would mean risking everything. The heat radiating from the creature was intense, and he could feel his skin blistering even from a distance. As the creature climbed higher, the unstable rocks beneath its weight began to shift. An idea sparked in Ethan's mind. He couldn't kill it outright, but maybe he could use the environment to his advantage. Ethan climbed higher, luring the creature onto the most precarious section of the outcrop. He could feel the rocks trembling beneath his weight, the ground threatening to give way. The creature's molten eyes burned with fury as it lunged for him again, its claws scraping against the stone. "Come on," Ethan muttered, positioning himself near the edge. Just a little closer. The creature roared and lunged, its massive body slamming into the outcrop. The force of the impact was too much. The rocks gave way, collapsing in a cascade of jagged stone and molten earth. Ethan leapt to safety, landing hard on a lower ledge as the creature tumbled into the abyss below. Its roar echoed as it disappeared, the sound fading into the depths. Ethan lay there for a moment, his chest heaving as he caught his breath. His body ached, his skin burned, and his mind reeled from the ordeal. But he was alive. For now. The sentinel's voice returned, its tone as cold and unyielding as ever. "Impressive, but your trials are far from over." Ethan pushed himself to his feet, glaring into the empty air. "Yeah, well, bring it on. I'm not done either." The air shimmered again, and Ethan felt the now familiar sensation of being pulled into the void. Wherever the sentinel was sending him next, he knew one thing for certain. He would face it head-on, just as he always had. Because no matter how monstrous his enemies might be, Ethan Taylor was a real monster, and he wasn't going down without a fight.